Hi, my name is Sandra Chikore. I am a special needs educator from Sweletemba, a township in Worcester. I am also a mom to a son with an intellectual disability. In this video, I am going to talk briefly about some environmental factors that hinder progress for the child with severe to profound intellectual disability, which will include poverty and social issues. I will also share with you some of the challenges that I have experienced as a caregiver. Children with severe to profound intellectual disability find themselves in all kinds of environments, many of which hinder their progress. By environment, I am referring to the external environment aspects in the community and how the accessibility of surroundings can affect activities of participation and learning where learners live. The internal environment refers to aspects in the homes and the centers where children learn that can also hinder their progress. There are various environmental factors that can hinder the progress of children with severe to profound disabilities, such as physical barriers. Physical barriers in any external environment may include all the physical structures in the community, such as public parks, libraries, shops, roads, that can make it challenging for the child to participate in or to explore. At times, even dangerous as these structures are not always designed to include children with intellectual disabilities. Let me give an example. In Zweletemba, majority of the community lives in informal housing, and the most of the roads are uneven, and physically transporting children to and from the center is a challenge. The roads are also filled with big stones and potholes. This means that the school bus cannot drive and deliver children door to door, especially in hazardous weather conditions that worsen the road. The driver therefore has to physically carry immobile children from houses to the bus, causing back pain issues to both the driver and the child at times. The children can also easily get hurt due to the trip being rough and bumpy. And because the road is bumpy and rough, the children may not be interested in what can be learned about the road, such as seeing other cars drive by, buildings, trees, animals, but be driving in fear. This is just one example of how a physical barrier from the external environment can hinder the progress of a child as children learn from what they are exposed to. Physical barriers in an internal environment include infrastructure at the home itself, such as bathroom facilities, running water, electricity, walls, narrow passages, and stairs where furniture is placed, and even the unavailability of objects that may limit what a child is exposed to, or the kinds of objects that may be unsuitable or does not cause a good stimulation. Another barrier is language and teaching methods of caregivers. It is important for the child not only to be cared for in terms of feeding and bathing needs, but to be stimulated through learning. Most therapists and professionals who come to assist with program implementation in the centers cannot speak or understand Xhosa. Vice versa, the caregivers and children cannot speak or understand Afrikaans and English. If there is no interpreter available, there cannot be progress made. In my center, we have a caregiver who has been with the center since inception. She cares for the children really well, but she cannot read and write. Before, it was not a problem. The center was a place where children could be cared for to partially relieve parents during the day. Now, staff need to have a level of literacy to understand the concept of teaching methods and terms used by therapists. When caregivers do not have the necessary literacy skills or are not uplifted, this has an impact in the child's learning too. Let's move on to poverty and social issues. This is a barrier in itself and impacts on many other aspects such as the standards of living, the family dynamics and finances. A child who comes from an affluent home where the family and community members participate in decisions concerning their wealth, finances, dietary needs, health, and where they get their education is very different to a child who comes from a poverty-stricken home. Let me explain. People living in extreme poverty have limited income. It is therefore not strange that most poor families find it very challenging to access support resources needed to cope. At times, families struggle when their child is diagnosed with a disability, be it physical or intellectual. Some children are placed in foster care and some are sent to Emaxhosa in the rural areas to be cared for by elderly people so parents can find employment. Emaxhosa clinics and schools are extremely far, and in most cases, children will no longer access education and healthcare. This will also mean the family dynamics change for the child, which can hinder their progress and break ties with mother and child, father and child, and the child and his or her siblings. Another aspect is finance. Financial stability plays an undeniable role in how a child can access healthcare and education. Most parents are not formally employed, so it's always a greater financial burden when caring for a child with a disability. In many cases, I have witnessed a parent or the entire family becoming dependent on the care dependency social grant to cater for the whole household. Then there is also cultural and traditional beliefs that affect the learning and health of a learner. Let me share one of my experiences. As working with children with disabilities, I get to witness different levels of functionality in children who have a vast spectrum of intellectual disabilities. There is a child I want to speak about. She is a 5-year-old learner, was newly admitted at our center. She had fetal alcohol syndrome and epilepsy diagnosis and was on epilim medication. She had limited speech and only said a few words, but she was very active and always willing to help after lunch by taking the plates to the kitchen. And despite the challenges with the balance and posture, she was potty trained. In class, she would struggle to hold crayons, to color, and had a short focus span of 5 minutes at most. Stimulation activities were implemented for learning, and I noticed that her health was regressing rapidly, as she would get 4 to 5 epileptic seizures a day. I noticed she was no longer learning effectively. She would spend most of her time in the center feeling sick and sleeping in the sickbed. I took interest in her case and decided to do a home visit just to see if the parents needed any help coping at home. Upon my arrival, her family shared that they gave the learner traditional medication and they lacked the belief in modern scientific medication. But they believed their child was being haunted by evil spirits that were causing her to fall. I asked what the doctor had said, and they expressed that the social worker had directed them to the clinic to get medication for her falling spells, but they had not used it. They didn't believe it would work. They would go monthly to the clinic to fill in prescriptions, but were never administered to the learner. Alas, it now made sense to me why the child was regressing. Though I feared being disregarded, I asked for the month's prescription to administer at the center to see if there would be a change in the learner. In 2 weeks, the seizures had dramatically disappeared. I went back to the house to discuss the positive change, and they too had noticed it. We discussed the importance of adherence to medication, and they promised to give the learner her daily medications. We could keep and administer the morning and afternoon dosage at the center. At the center, this child is thriving every day with learning activities. As a caregiver, I am a link between parents, the center, and our community partners that offer different services to our learners. I spend most of the day in the center with the children implementing inclusive learning activities. It is my duty to liaise with children with severe to profound intellectual disability teams and be aware of each child's individual support and treatment plan to stimulate cognitive development in learners. As a caregiver, I've also experienced many challenges when it comes to helping the child learn, such as absenteeism. When learners miss school, they fall behind on learning activities. It is especially challenging to achieve set goals when there is interferences with structured daily routines. Also, stigma. In most townships, stigma relating to disabilities is still widespread. Parents fear being unaccepted if they are known to have a child with a disability. Some people have the idea that disability is related to witchcraft and karma. The community still needs to be educated about disability awareness and that disabilities are not contagious nor transmitted. There is a need to understand that all children have human rights too. So, my challenge is at times working and changing the attitudes and mindsets of the parents and the community. With the challenge of stigma comes early intervention. Due to stigma, some children are still hidden in their homes, far away from the glaring eyes of the community. There are therefore delays to come to the centers, which deters in their social, physical, cognitive, language, and developmental path. It is very important for children to attend centers and schools early to yield better cognitive outcomes. Then, limited resources. Some of our learners do not have adequate housing. They live in the informal sectors where there is no sanitation, toilets, clean water, electricity, as well as even roads to access transportation to the centers and clinics. Even the center transport often gets tire punctures due to the bad roads. In conclusion, environmental factors can be modified to enhance inclusion and participation in homes, centers, and in the community to create enabling environments for children with severe to profound disabilities to be able to access inclusive education by addressing poverty and social issues.